Good evening. Today we'll be discussing Google and doing a case study on that. My name is Matt, and this is
Jordan.
We're back.
All right,
Thank you,
here we
Jordan.
go.
So we will be discussing now how Google kind of got its start. It happened 20 years ago. It was put together by two PhD students at Stanford, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Really, it was Larry Page's idea. Sergey Brin was another brain behind it. What they did was, as students, they designed a system to make web searches work better and produce better results. And they named it Backrub originally. Now, they didn't want to be businessmen. They were students and wanted to keep going down that route. They actually tried to sell to Yahoo and failed to do so. Yahoo didn't want anything to do with what Google had going on at the time. They ended up acquiring $1 million in investments and set up shop in Menlo Park, California, in a garage. So how did they make money originally? It was through advertising on their web pages. They had two different programs, AdWords and AdSense. You could put a very low-key text advertisement on the search result itself. Google also does advertisements on web pages, kind of bring the whole thing together that way. As time went on, Google expanded outside of just being a search engine provider. They now have Google Apps, which includes things like Google Maps, Google Scholar, Google Docs, you name it. They produce a software for non-Apple phones called Android. Some people don't like it. But anyways, they provide the software for free to put on these phones. They don't actually necessarily have anything to do with the phone itself. They don't produce the Samsung phones, although the Android software is on that phone. On Google devices, such as the Pixel, they do have the Play Store. And let me just say, you'll find the Play Store with Android devices. This is something that rivals your iTunes Store. It provides movies, music, games, things of that nature. Google does get outside of the realm of just software. They have the Pixel, which is a cell phone, a Pixel Slate, a tablet, and the Pixel Book, which is a laptop. Some examples of things they've come up with over time here. In other news, in 2006, they acquired YouTube. YouTube, of course, is user-generated content with advertising. 10 years later or so, YouTube Premium was born, where it's a subscription service. You pay for no ads, and there is some original content as well. Really, what this is an opportunity for increased advertising and data collection. That's exactly what Google is all about. Along the way here, we had the Google TV. That project fell flat on its face. It's no longer being made. That's one example of things that didn't go right with Google. But what has gone right is their search engine. By 2010, more than 50% of revenue and traffic was generated outside of the US, with billions of searches per day happening. Now in 2018, that's up to 2 trillion searches per day. Of course, the population of the world has increased since then, so there are naturally more customers to reach out to. I'm going to talk about the industry and competition that Google is in. And what is it? It's a technology industry. It moves incredibly fast. Innovation is necessary for survival, and Google must utilize and move out into the global market even more to reach the billions of customers that don't live in the United States. Google follows what's called a generic differentiation strategy, according to Porter from the textbook there. Simply, Google strives to make things better. Quality is everything. In terms of talking about major competitors for Google, you can't really, it's hard to narrow it down because Google does a lot. We can talk about search engines where you see MSN, Yahoo, and even Amazon popping up as competitors in that arena. As far as electronics, if Apple and Samsung with the cell phones and electronic devices, Amazon has the Kindle and Kindle tablet and things of that nature, which compete with what Google has as well. There's kind of another side to the competition, and that is in the collection of data. Social media has popped up recently, more recently, of course, Facebook. And with Facebook, not only do you get the information from what people are looking at, people on Facebook actually give Facebook information that marketers and advertisers want. It's a data mine. That's in direct competition with what Google does because they mine and analyze the data from all the searches and linking back and forth in here. What are people thinking about? What are people doing? What's trending? Facebook is a direct competitor in that degree, as well as Amazon. I'm going to talk more about Amazon. Amazon is an unexpected nemesis. Online shoppers are more likely to go straight to Amazon, with 48% doing so instead of going to Google and looking for your item. People are going straight to Amazon. Now, what this means is, if I'm not going to Google to search for this item I'm looking for, those advertisers are missing out on my business. And with that said, Amazon has many similar offerings, like I talked about. They have the Fire tablet. Amazon Prime offers entertainment streaming, which of course rivals the Play Store. They also offer business analytics in the form of Amazon Kinesis, which rivals Google's product, which is Google Analytics, simply enough.
All right, I'll move on to Google's financials. All right, to start off, just a brief overview of their financials. Google has a pretty unique financial system. As stated earlier, most of their revenue comes from advertisements. 82% of Google's $97.5 billion revenue in 2018 was from advertising. 13.7% of that was from their services and their products. And then the last 4.3% was from what they call other bets on their financial statements, which is all the other companies under the Alphabet umbrella. So now we have a breakdown of their financials by region or regions around the globe. The United States is their most profitable region. It generates 45.7% of their total revenue. Google holds the highest portion of U.S. advertising market at 37.2% currently. Facebook is in second place. They hold 19.6%. And their market share of the advertising market has decreased, Google and Facebook, due to the upcoming of Amazon, who now takes up 2.7% of the advertising market. And then some of the other, Google's other regions are in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. That is 33% of their total revenue. Asia accounts for 15.7%, and the other Americas, like Latin America and Canada, have 5.5% of their total revenue. Now we have a graph of their revenue over the past 10 years by quarter. As you can see from the graph, it's been a pretty consistent upward trend with small spikes in the fourth quarter of every year. As of right now, in 2018, only through the third quarter, they're just about matching their total revenue for last year, which is $110 billion. Right now, like I said before, it's $97.5 billion. And then a breakdown of their revenue, the breakdown of their expenses. 41.6% billion is costs. 15.3% is in research and development. 15.3 billion. $11 billion in sales and marketing, $6 billion in general fees, and then $5 billion in fines from the European Trade Commission. Next, we have some of Google's key margins. Their cost of goods sold is increasing at a higher rate, which is causing their profit margins to decrease. As you can see, we have their gross margin, operating margin, and net margin. Since about 2011, you can kind of see that it's a slowly downward trend. It doesn't necessarily mean that the company is doing badly, but it's something to take note of. Their margins are actually still pretty competitive compared to other competitors in their market. They're in the middle of the pack, basically, as we'll see on the next slide here. Now we have a comparison of all the margins of all the different companies, or all the different competitors: Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, and Amazon. Currently, Apple and Amazon, their margin, you can't really see it, but their margins are higher percentages than Google's, and wait, I might have that backwards. Microsoft and Facebook have higher percentages. Apple and Amazon have lower percentages. Now we have their assets. Google, just like their revenue, has been increasing their assets at a consistent rate. Their total assets is around $221 billion. This is due to the consistent acquisition of smaller companies. They've acquired over 200 different companies in their lifespan. And then, as you can see, here's a percentage of the increases of their assets. In the past 5 years, they've increased their assets by about 10 to 20%. Their liabilities, from 2017 to 2018, their liabilities increased from $44 billion to $51.6 billion. Their highest increase in liabilities is around 2010 to 2011. And then after that, you can see that there has been very little increase in debt. With actually, they lost some debt in a quarter in 2016. And now moving on to some of their key ratios. Their current ratio and quick ratio, or the current ratio is at 4.14, quick ratio at 4.11. This is considered pretty high. Might be because they're not utilizing their assets effectively, but it is good because they're able to pay off their short-term debts easily. It's also due to the fact that $106 billion out of $129 billion in their assets is marketable securities. This is actually considered fairly high for most companies. Their debt to equity ratio is at 0.3. This is pretty good, seeing as the optimal ratio is around 0.4. This means that they have very low risk, and they could actually even benefit from increasing their debt to equity ratio. Their inventory turnover is also slightly high. It's 11.7 as compared to Apple and Microsoft. Apple has inventory turnover of 5.5 and Microsoft at 2.74. This could be because Google doesn't produce nearly as many high quantity of products as Apple and Microsoft. Next, we'll take a look at Google stocks. Google stocks, as you can see, just like their revenue and their assets, have increased at a general steady pace. Their initial offering was at around $85 back in the early 2000s, and then now it's currently at $1,036 per share. In 2014, they actually had a stock split. They split their common stocks into Class A, or what they call Class A and Class C stocks. Class A stocks have voting rights, while Class C stocks do not. Class C stocks are generally held by their employees and lower management. They also have Class B stocks, which have 10 times the power of voting rights. And now we have their market capitalization. It's just a little graph of some of their top competitors. Well, actually, I think this is the top 5 currently in the U.S. market. So we got Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft. Oop, what did I just do? Wow, I didn't know that was touchscreen. So as you can see, Apple is at number 1. Google is currently at number 4 position. They have never reached the number 1 position. They've been at between rank 5 and 2 since around 2014. They were recently surpassed by Microsoft and Amazon. Just as a quick summary of the financials, you can see that they have consistent upward trends. They have good growth. They're pretty financially stable, and they will likely get surpassed in the future if there's no changes in their trends.
So now I will briefly go over a SWOT analysis for Google. SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities. Opportunities done last so that it can segue us into our recommendations better. For strengths, what Google has a lot to do with what it is. It has a big name, it's a household name, everyone knows it. It has become a verb. You want to find something out, go ahead and Google it. They have simple, easy to use products. What makes Google search so popular is the fact that it is so simple and fast. The company prides itself on the speed of the searches. Right at the top, it'll show you that 3 million results were found in 0.0073 seconds. Again, that's something the company prides itself on. And the third point, real quick, is data collection. When you search for stuff, the company takes note of that. And when 2 billion people search for stuff, they take note of what people are searching for. This information is very valuable and it's given to advertisers. And it just lets the advertisers figure out exactly who they should be advertising and what they should be advertising. Weaknesses, ironically, include an overdependence on advertising. This has something to do with Amazon coming up as a competitor in that advertising area. If people are going to Amazon to search for what they're looking for, they're learning about products, they're finding related products, they're not hanging out on Google, being exposed to Google ads and whatnot. As time goes on, as Amazon continues to eat at brick and mortar stores and more people shop online, you're going to see less and less advertisers focus on Google and more of them focus on Amazon, I believe. Another weakness might be that they have too many services. We're presenting right now using Google Slides. This isn't Microsoft PowerPoint. It's a similar version of Microsoft PowerPoint. Here's the deal, it's free. I didn't pay anything to use this. If I were to go into Best Buy, buy a laptop, I'd have to pay for Microsoft Office. This is just one of many examples of services that Google provides us that we don't pay for. They assume that I'll go back to Google, get exposed to advertising, and that's kind of how they'll make their money. But how will this be going forward? How long can this go before they maybe should think about charging? And there is, going back to search engines, there's potential for abuse and manipulation of the search engine algorithms, where in kind of an overly technical way for me to explain, entities can make their search results appear at the top of the list. That hurts the integrity of the search results, and over time, customers, or their users, in other words, will begin to notice and shift elsewhere. That's definitely a weakness. Next, I will talk about some threats. I spoke earlier about Facebook. Social media is a threat. A lot of people live on social media. They spend a lot of time on social media. That's where the advertisers are going. They're following people to social media. They can easily put an ad right where you're at on your Facebook page. You're not on Google, you're on Facebook. So that's a threat that Google has to consider. Of course, they have their more obvious competitors, like the Yahoo, the Amazon, MSN. Sorry, not Yahoo. Sorry, Amazon not being an obvious competitor, but Yahoo, MSN. Of course, Microsoft is not to be slept on. It's a tech giant that's been around, and they can and will innovate and take market share if if they can. And Les talked about threat to Google's success is high employee turnover. It kind of seems to be a problem in Silicon Valley in general, but they need to keep those people on board so that they're not going to competitors and sharing other secrets. It's that the company can kind of stay focused and tracked on improving, not constantly bringing people in, onboarding, spending money in that way. The last thing I will talk about are some of their opportunities. They have an opportunity to kind of increase their brand loyalty. When you think about Apple, Apple has people who are diehard. I don't really know many diehard Google fans. This is an area that they can build upon, create diehard Google fans. The second opportunity that they have is to move into e-commerce more so. Amazon's kind of encroaching on them as a search engine. Perhaps Google can begin to do the whole thing as an online retailer. And finally, they can expand their global presence. Although Google is widely used overseas, that's the 350 million people in America pale in comparison to the billions outside. So there's going to be room for exponential growth in taking Google products and figuring out what exactly fits their needs across the world.
All right, and I'll move on to some recommendations for Google. Start off, first recommendation is possibly a rewards program for using their services, products, search engine. Some of the advantages of having a rewards program is greater loyalty from their customers. It could generate more traffic to the Google website, causing more ad revenue. And it's already an existing strategy that many companies use, so they'll have an easier time to implement this successfully. Some of the disadvantages of this is it could hurt the bottom line. If they're offering discounts or of some sort on their products, it may hurt their profits greatly. Many loyalty programs already exist, so they need to create a unique one that will draw in customers. That may be difficult. And then people could find a way to exploit flaws through the use of robots, or like you were saying with the algorithms earlier. Another way some ways they can implement this is setting up like an information page on their Google website, because they kind of already have a couple of tabs on there. It says like store, and I can't remember what the other ones are, but they could have just an information page to inform people about this new program with all its facets and everything you need to know about it. They could also create surveys to see what kinds of things people might want discounted or implemented in this rewards program. And then to measure the success of this recommendation, they would have to view their traffic on their websites to see if there's any increases in numbers of visits on their websites. And then they would also have to see if how their profit margins are affected, if they drop too low, and how high their revenue is increasing. Next recommendation would be to get into the e-commerce market. Google already has what's called Google Pay. It's kind of like PayPal, Apple Pay, all the other online payment services. So they already have that to start off with. That people could use that for their products. They already have a large consumer base, as people, Google already has a lot of traffic on their websites, so they can make use of this easily. And then Google already advertises for companies, so they could even benefit from possibly distributing or shipping these products, kind of like Amazon. Some of the disadvantages is that competitors like Amazon already exist in that market, and Google does not have the necessary facilities or infrastructure to implement like a distribution network. Some ways to implement this are maybe to acquire warehouses and shipping companies. A local one maybe like Uline, it's a pretty smaller company, and Google is known to acquire a lot of companies, so they could potentially acquire something like that. Another way is they can add it as an additional functionality to the Google website. And then some ways that they'll measure the success of this, they would have to compare market shares to top competitors like Amazon and see how much of the market that they are taking from this new implementation, and measure the growth over the next few years. And a final recommendation is to increase their global presence. As you already know, most of their revenue is from advertising, so getting more people to hit their website will inversely cause more revenue. They already have an easy and attractive service, so it's easier for new customers to get involved in it. And then, as stated before, they have the ability to acquire foreign companies, so they could potentially get advertisements more from foreign companies in foreign lands. Some of the disadvantages is that there are already other search engines that are prevalent in foreign countries. For instance, in Russia, there's one called Yandex, who's the major search engine there, and in China, it is Baidu. And then another disadvantage is that not everyone has access to the internet. When I looked it up, it said around 50% of the people on the planet have access to internet, so it might be hard to get more people to use their product because the market's already saturated. Some ways to implement this is to get advertising contracts with foreign companies, or maybe even strengthen their ties with foreign companies that they already have, like Samsung. And they could even create physical stores in these foreign countries. And they would measure the success of this through growth in traffic in foreign countries that Google has little presence in currently, and increased numbers of internet users. And that is all for recommendations and our project. Thank you.
Thank you.